We're going to talk for a few minutes about fur and fur farming. While the wearing of real fur has declined in most Western countries in recent years, it's still an industry worth almost £22 billion sterling worldwide annually. Many European countries have banned the farming of animals for the purpose of fur production, though most do not ban the import of real fur. Here in Ireland, fur farming is still carried out. While it's on a small scale compared to some countries, some 200,000 minks are reared annually and around 100 people are employed on 3 separate fur farms. But now People Before Profit Solidarity has introduced a private members' bill to the Dail to ban fur farms in this country. They previously asked the Minister for Agriculture, Michael Creed, to ban these farms, but he said they were legitimate enterprises. Well, with us here in studio is People Before Profit Solidarity TD Ruth Coppinger, who's sponsoring the bill, and Redmond O'Hanlon, who's a retired fur farmer. You're both very welcome to the programme. Thank you for coming in to us. Ruth Coppinger, to you first of all, you pointed out in your presentation to the Dail on this that in fact there was a government decision about a decade ago to ban fur farms, or at least to phase them out, but that in fact was reversed. Now, why do you want to revisit it now?
Because all of the evidence shows that mink are actually wild animals. They're semi-aquatic, they're meant to be solitary. So putting them into groups, into metal cages, is completely unnatural. And now we've had Veterinary Ireland coming out and saying that you can't regulate it, you can't make it kinder, because it's actually not farming. And then the mink are at 6 months gassed, which actually, by the way, is extremely cruel because of their breathing capabilities, and their skins are pulled off. So country after country has been banning fur. We're very behind. We're a laggard now in terms of animal rights. But also fashion houses, all of the major designers have had to turn their back on fur because young people in particular are completely unwilling to accept. We aren't even talking about food production here. 80% of people in a Red C poll want to see this banned because they see it as cruel, barbaric, and to produce a luxury product for, very wealthy people that nobody needs and very few people will ever see. And it's a real example of capitalism disregarding, for the sake of profit, animal welfare and life.
But we do, and you've reminded us, we do breed animals for food. So animals are farmed and they are slaughtered at a certain point to provide that food. So what's the real essential difference between that and fur farming?
Well, I think Veterinary Ireland, they go around 2 farms every single day. And the fact that they've come out, I think, has been a game changer in terms of persuading. Every political party in the Dáil now has said that this should be banned. Because of the nature of mink, who should be solitary, actually they've said that mink and fur farms do not have a life worth living in any way. To be in touch with other mink who they should be fighting, that's their instinct. To be in touch with humans in that way. And then, so their entire lives and their deaths are extremely cruel. And I think that's why people aren't willing to accept this any longer. It's not necessary. And I would be very concerned that it isn't actually 100, it's gone down now. This is actually an ailing industry. It's been propped up.
100 people working?
No, it's about 47 in the 3 farms. And I think that the minister based that statement on old figures. Right. The exports have fallen. From in 2013 it was about 8 million and now it's down to 1.6, and these workers should be given alternative employment and something more productive.
Okay, well let me bring in Redmond O'Hanlon here. I say he was a fur farmer for I think 30 years.
30
is that right?
Years, yes.
So what do you say to this case being made by Ruth Coppinger?
A load of nonsense. It all began when Walt Disney gave Mickey Mouse a human personality. That's when animal rights thinking began. They are talking about mink as though they have a human intelligence, and they're thinking mink have been domesticated for over 100 years now, so they're not a wild animal anymore. They are in their nature, but not in their environment. And the idea that anyone would close down fur farm, I tell you, any farmer that's listening to this, who's rearing pigs or sheep in a field or calves in enclosed housing and all of that, had better watch out because you're going to come next. It is absolute nonsense. I was a mink farmer for 30 years. I was introduced into mink farming by Willie McDougall, who was a vet. My partner was a vet. And for 30 years, we reared mink. And mink are reared for their quality of their fur. In other words, they're like children to us. We look after them, so we do. I was 30 years, I had one fortnight's holidays in 30 years, and that was for my honeymoon, because we made sure that those mink were looked after. And only if they are looked after will they produce the product that we're looking for.
So what then, Redmond, what do you say to Veterinary Ireland, who have come to the conclusion they've looked at this in relation to the treatment of the animals, and they say that fur farms and fur farmers cannot prevent the welfare problems regularly encountered on fur farms, such as stereotypies, which I think is repetitive movement, and serious injuries?
I've just been listening to what the veterinary people have said. They said that they're upset because they have to live beside one another. That's another load of nonsense. They've been living beside one another for 100 years.
So you don't accept that they are wild animals being contained in this environment? A mink is not like a dog. A dog has a reasonable amount of what we will call intelligence here. In other words, a mink is a mindless creature. He is a killer. Right? He has to be separated, so he has, or he will just kill. But they don't think. They don't. I've heard descriptions where they're looking out and I wish I was up there on the hills walking away. Yeah, I mean it's just. Do you accept that they have rights? That these animals have rights to? No,
animals do not have rights. Human beings have the rights, but human beings have responsibilities to make sure that animals are treated properly.
Okay,
so they are.
Ruth
I
Coppinger?
think that these are the attitudes that we need to reevaluate in our society, and that people are starting to reevaluate. So Redmond says they're not wild, but Veterinary Ireland say they are wild. They're meant to be also semi-aquatic. They're meant to have a range of water of up to 7 kilometres. So putting them into these conditions causes dehydration, it often causes hunger, and it causes unnatural behaviour. I think there's a baseline through which most people don't agree animals should be used for entertainment, just for humans. They don't believe, certainly for non-food production, which we're talking about here, there are alternatives to fur. It's not like a society of hundreds of years ago. And the way that Redmond has talked about animals, I don't know if you're an expert and you've done research into but the level of intelligence of an animal doesn't mean that they should be mistreated by humans for no reason. And I think that that's why 80% of people have come out and said that this is barbaric, that we are lagging behind. I mean, this was banned in the UK almost 20 years ago.
How widespread are the bans across Europe?
Over 14 countries. I mean, currently now Norway, which is a much bigger reliance on fur production than we have. And that's the other thing. Workers, I mean, I'm a socialist, so I'm concerned about workers' rights. They can't rely on this industry for employment. In Scotland, when this was banned, they diversified into food, into strawberry production, which is actually quite profitable.
Yeah, see, that's the point. We are an outlier, it would seem, on this, and that this has all the appearances of a sunset industry.
What they want to do is close down the remaining 3 fur farms. The people who are employed can go off and find jobs somewhere else, in the next field or something like that. And to close down mink farms is going to cost millions, by the way, and the taxpayer out there is going to have to pay compensation for all these.
The taxpayer's paying right now to keep the farms propped up. It's actually been because Údarás na Gaeltachta have forked out $250,000 to these farms because they're in rural areas. So actually,
and because they're providing employment in areas where there mightn't be a lot of other opportunities.
It's mainly seasonal employment with workers coming from abroad, and I'm concerned about that. But I actually think these
are they
workers
less entitled to work just because they come from abroad?
Of course not. But what I'm saying is these workers can't rely on this employment. It's been noticed actually that the fur farms have been extremely quiet since the bill was introduced. And by the way, I mean, the bill is the support of all parties. We need to know what the stance of Fine Gael and the Independent Alliance is. But we'll be putting the bill on the 3rd of July. We'd ask people to keep the pressure on them. But we actually would ask the Minister to ban this by ministerial order, like he did with wild animals in circuses when Solidarity had a bill pending on that as well. This could be done quite quickly, and let's have a discussion about diversifying and providing alternative employment.
And just a final word, Redmond O'Hanlon, because it's not just the animal welfare issue, it's the fact that this seems to be a declining industry.
It's declining because of intimidation and begrudgery. People don't like seeing people wearing furs. And the idea that there's an alternative, he's talking about fake furs. Last week we had it all about global warming. Do you know how all the fake plastics and everything that goes into manufacturing fake furs? I mean, this is a joke.
All right, look, we'll leave it there. Redmond O'Hanlon, thank you for talking to us.
Thank
And thanks
you.
also